Anthony said, decent at best at drafting. Not sure if it's the scouting department or the head dogs running it, Pete Carroll and John Schneider, but they've got more misses than hits when looking at the totality of their draft record. I think Anthony hit the nail on the head here, but I also think that he hit the nail on the head when it comes to just about every single team across the NFL in the draft. The NFL draft is the great equalizer, and I think it's easy for anyone who is a hardcore fan of a sports team, rides and dies with them 16, now 17 Sundays a year. Then you see an NFL draft take place, and maybe you're so into it, you're reading all the mock drafts, you're looking at everybody's big board, and then the team doesn't do the things that you want them to do. You express frustration there. You look back at the team's track record, and you think, wow, I mean, since 2011, 2012, the Seahawks haven't done so hot in the NFL draft. And what's interesting about that is I honestly feel like that's how every single team across the NFL feels about their team's ability to draft and their team's ability to make decisions game management-wise. Everyone thinks that they're terrible at both. The reality is the Seahawks are in the middle of the pack because this draft, no one's great at it every single year. We want teams to be great at it, but you're going to have some bad draft classes, like the Seahawks in 2017 or the Seahawks in 2018. When you have back-to-back of them, it puts you in a pretty difficult situation where maybe instead of taking actual draft picks in a draft class, you're going to decide to trade those draft picks for veteran players that you know can play now. For example, the Seahawks, of course, last year, they trade 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick for Jamal Adams. They also trade their third-round pick this year. They trade their fifth-round pick this year for Gabe Jackson. They trade their 7th-round pick this year for Carlos Dunlap. Last year, traded a 5th-round pick for Quinton Dunbar. Before that, traded a 5th-round pick for Quandre Diggs. Before that, traded a 3rd-round pick for Jadeveon Clowney. The list goes on and on. I'm sure there's a guy that they traded a draft pick for that's a veteran that I'm missing along the way there. The Seahawks have not been bad at drafting, though, over the last 2 seasons. And it makes me curious as to what this 3-man draft class will end up being for Seattle. Dwayne Eskridge was the first of those picks, and he actually joined us this morning on Danny and Gallant. You should check out the podcast. I thought he had a lot of energy. Got me very excited about the pick, though I do sometimes find myself guilty of liking a draft prospect or a player and his ability to interview so much that it affects my opinion on what that player is. But Eskridge is walking into, I think, a very good situation, and he weighed in on this wide receiver group that he is joining.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm coming into a great group. I feel with Tyler Lockett, he's the OG, you know, that has a lot of wisdom for everything. So I'm looking to learn a lot from him. And then DK, he's the superstar of the league right now, you know. So that's full room, you know. I'm really excited to come there and learn and compete with those guys and turn our room up.
A great room to join, and while the Seahawks have had some issues drafting wide receivers in the 4th round, the John Schneider and Pete Carroll era has done a pretty good job, I think, at drafting wide receivers, starting with Golden Tate in 2010, go a little bit further, and you see the Seahawks take Paul Richardson in the 2nd round in 2014. He was a solid player for you. Tyler Lockett in 2015, a 3rd-round pick, one of your better 3rd-round picks, not quite Russell Wilson, but he's definitely pretty good on that front. Then you go a little bit further, and you see DK Metcalf, of course, and Freddie Swain last year. They've got a pretty good track record when it comes to that position. I think Dwayne Eskridge is going to do pretty well. But the question that I have for you today is just how good are the Seahawks at draft? Fill in the blank. They are blank as far as their ability to draft every single year. Some more responses, 710. They are peach pie at drafting, the peach pie of drafters. I would assume that makes them forgotten because while on with Danny, while I would not think of peach pie very high on my list, I am not somebody that ever lived in the great state of Georgia. I would say that as far as peach pie, that is definitely not the first thing that comes to mind. But there are so many things that you can make pie with. Pecan pie, as someone had texted in. I mean, boysenberry pie. I had never heard of that before. Apparently, that's a local thing that I must try. You can put meat in pie. It's pretty good. Shepherd's pie? Huh? Anybody? Text in 710. The Seahawks are one of 32 at drafting. It's such a crapshoot They do the best with what they have. I feel the same way. I think that is a very accurate way to assess the draft, and I think we just tend to overreact to it. And there were some people that were overreacting in the moment to the Seahawks not addressing the offensive line in the draft, and we'll see if their faith in Ethan Posick is placed correctly. Honestly, I feel like of all the guys coming out of draft weekend on the Seahawks roster, he's probably the one that should be the most thankful. I mean, there was a center available, and the Seahawks, instead of taking said center, they decided to go with Dwayne Eskridge. But I think a lot of people, when they saw Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma available there, and who eventually goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think we always assume that the Chiefs are going to be good at drafting. By the way, they're not. If you take a look at their track record over the last couple of years, they haven't been very good at drafting, much like the Patriots, much like the Seahawks. You know, like it's interesting. We think that these draft classes are not good, and yet we put implicit faith in teams that have been successful for years and years as far as their ability to draft every single season. It's weird, though. It doesn't traditionally work out like that. But I think Ethan Posick should be very thankful that the Seahawks did not draft Creed Humphrey, because with the way that he finished the season, he didn't play particularly well.